Vēlos jūs iepazīstināt ar Mischu Dohleru no Lielbritānijas. Mischa ir Londonas Karaliskās koledžas bezvadu komunikāciju profesors, telekomunikāciju izpētes centra vadītājs un viedo pilsētu aizsācēja, kompānijas World Sensing līdzdibinātājs, kā arī vadošais lektors pasaules lielākajā tehnisko profesionāļu biedrībā Advanced Technology for Humanity. Viņš ir aizsācis vairākas pētniecības jomas, devis ieguldījumu vairāku bezvadu tīklu internet, jeb of things, jeb lietu interneta, machine to machine un kiberdrošības standartu attīstībā. Mischa Dohler darbojas kā politikas, tehnoloģiju un uzņēmējdarbības konsultants, piemēram, Richarda Bransona Carbon War Room apvienotās karalistes Lordu palātā, apvienotās karalistes vadības uzņēmējdarbības inovāciju un profesionālo prasmju departamentā, arī Eiropas komisijā, kas mums varbūt nav tik neparasti, ISO viedo pilsētu darba grupā, kā arī daudzos startup, jeb uzsākumu, jauno biznesa uzsākumos. Ir arī uzņēmējs, tātad investors. Vēl es gribu pieminēt aizrautīgs pianists, kurš brīvi runā 6 valodās. Tā kā aicināsim uz skatuves Mischu Dohleru atklāt savu skatījumu uz izpētes, inovāciju un uzņēmējdarbības par lomu 21. gadsimtā. Welcome, Professor Dohler. The floor is yours.
Now, not even 20 years ago, it took an army of people to build a billion-dollar company. Zoom forward 2015, 2014. Now these are 10 people, 20 people. Look at WhatsApp. It's a massive achievement with a very small crowd. What's happening? There's a massive shift on how innovation really happens, and that's really what I would love to talk about today. Now, because we don't know each other, I thought I'd start off explaining first who I am and where I'm really based. So I thought I'd introduce you a little bit King's College London. Who of you has been to London? That's great. I meant to invite you for a coffee next time you pass through, but I'll not do that because my office is not as good. But that's a view from my office. So those who have been to London, they know this is really downtown. We're the most centric university on the planet. I have direct walking distance to the House of Parliament. I work quite a lot with them, to all big businesses, to huge finances, to a very creative industry. It is a big privilege to be right now in Covent Garden area and work with that ecosystem. Now, King's College itself is a top 20 university globally out of a pool of 300,000 universities, and we are particularly proud of being at the beginning of some very pioneering development. The DNA was partially discovered at King's. The Maxwell equations were partially done at King's College London, so the whole digital economy started in the basement just 2 floors down where I am. And that is really a credit to the crowd we have been doing. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Now I'm heading a center which is called the Center for Telecom Research, and we are really different to the normal academics. I heard a reference that I don't look really like a professor, because we are actually different. So we do cutting edge research. I don't want to bore you with that. But we also have 4 companies coming out of our center at the current market aggregate value of about $100 million. So it's a total shift on how actually universities act, and I want to dwell on this a little bit. Now, personally, I've been through a little bit. I've been to academia. I worked for many years in a very big telco operator, France Telecom, Orange now branded. I started my own company, World Sensing, which hopefully middle next year will hit the $100 million barrier. So we're growing very quickly. I believe I was introduced on that. And I spend a lot of time on policy. You see me there talking to Angela Merkel as part of the Digitizing Europe initiative. I've been speaking a lot to Richard Branson on his carbon war room initiatives, the Mayor of London. So we're doing a lot of stuff really cutting edge on innovation. Okay, and this is where I really have my experience from. And I thought now talking a little bit about this change in innovation and how we can capitalize to really make something out of this. Now there's a big dilemma currently happening with large corporations, and I want want to start with large corporations, then I go on to startups, and then to universities, and then put it all together. So the large corporations, every single big company, whether that is IBM or whether that is Siemens or any of the other companies, was small at one point, right? So we started with some innovation, we started with some research, with something which is really a product which is able to grow. These were the heydays. The market was just forming, there were large margins, large profits, etc. Time goes by and the system changes, the ecosystem changes. Companies essentially enter markets which are highly competitive. You have typically competitive growing over time, so therefore your profit margins go down. The other issue is that clearly there is a certain maturity of the market, so your product sooner or later becomes a commodity item. And then the third problem is investors want their cash back. Right? So they're happy to sit for some 5 years, for some 10 years, watch the company grow, but once it's a big corporation, they want their money back. So suddenly, all the money which initially over the early years was flowing into the growth of the company, into the innovation, is drying out. And we see that. I've been part of Orange, of France Telecom. I worked directly with the CEO and CTO there when telecommunications became commodity. It was a Ferrari in the industry, and suddenly it became just a normal car, right? So that's a massive transformation, and our R&D department was shrank down from something really important to something which basically was just a vitrine. And many large corporations, which had really important R&D departments, end up having only vitrines. So the question is, how do they stay in the innovation cycle? Very simple. They acquire. So there's a shift. Instead of innovating in-house, they rather like the market to innovate and use the cash essentially to acquire companies who might be very expensive. So you hear of acquisitions of $200 million, $1 billion, $16 billion, and you think that's a lot of money. But if you actually translate that to a possible in-house cost to replicate what these companies have been doing, developing the product, getting all the customers, having really the whole market opening and penetration, that is likely so much more expensive. So companies who really want to stay at the forefront of innovation, at the really cutting edge of developments, they need to acquire companies. And that is really what is currently the trend in the United States as well as the UK, and I presume that will go further eastward. Now let me move on to startups. Now I have built a company from zero. I've been bleeding the whole thing. You read a lot of stuff. You read a lot of stuff from people who have never actually built a company. So once you're bleeding, it's a totally different story, and I presume we will hear more about this later on. Startups have to go through 3 critical points, in my opinion. The first point, the first milestone, is the milestone of no return, right? So that's the point where essentially, you know, before you've been playing around, you had an idea, you're doing a small prototype, you're showing it to friends, you're talking to people, etc. But this is not what gets you going. You still can go back and say, hey, I go to my daytime job, I do something else. The point of no return means you've taken on some investment. Maybe it's your government. Maybe it is an investor, maybe it's family, maybe you have publicized that quite a lot. But it's a point where you yourself would feel just extraordinarily embarrassed of saying, you know, I just let it go. So that's a psychologically a very important point to get going and build a team and get the thing going. The second important point is the transition from a prototype company to a product company. And that probably is the most painful transition, and a transition I see most companies fail, because to build a prototype around your idea as of 2015 is very simple, really simple. I just give you the example of the Internet of Things. Those who are skilled in the arts, they know you take an Arduino platform, you take some web services, you put things in here together between Friday evening that you have the idea in the pub, and Sunday night you have a product, a prototype up and running. You can show that, okay? It works. And but this is not what gets you going. You need a real product. You need a product which is able to live for 10 years. So you minimize on customer service. There's a proper market product match. There's a lot of exercise which needs to be done, and that's a transition which is particularly difficult to people coming out of university because they're used to stay in the prototyping phase. You can't do that. The real world requires a product. So that was phase number 2. Milestone number 3 is the transition from a product-based company to market-driven company, okay? If after a few years your company still has the majority engineers, you know this is not going to work out, okay? Market-driven means you need to sell. You need salespeople, marketing people, etc., etc. I see that again and again, that companies fail on that because they love their product. They want to optimize it. They want to make it nicer, better, more sexy, but they're losing time because what they should be doing is selling this stuff, right? So therefore, that is really important. I'm watching out on that when I'm doing all the mentoring in London on these 3 points. So what do I tell my people there? I tell them, you're doing a few mistakes, and mistake number 1 maybe, or the recommendation number 1 I give them is, you should know the name and the surname of the person who's going to buy your product before you start actually developing it. A lot of people don't know. They just have this fantastic idea. No doubt, it's great. It's a great utility. There's a good business model on an Excel sheet, but to really get it off the ground, you need to have somebody on the end who actually takes out a check and pays for that, right? If you don't know the name and the surname, you're lost. My recommendation number 2 is that you're typically just trying to be too perfect. Okay, because we love it. We want to have the best product going out. And the notion of a minimum viable product is something which is still very alien to a lot of companies. So, and the reason is because they come out of university, they come out of a tech environment, etc., and they don't dare. And I give them the example, think of like a football game. Think of Messi, right? So I presume you know Lionel Messi. If Lionel Messi only shoot it out of perfect situation, meaning, it's a penalty situation with no goalkeeper, that would be easy. But this is not what real life is about. He scores out of the impossible situation. And that's exactly what you need to do. Start to score with a product which is not necessarily perfect, okay? And the third recommendation I give, guys, you're too much in love with what you're doing. You love too much your product. Things move on. If there's something else which actually works better, is more efficient, more cheaper, dump what you have done internally and outsource it. Take it from somebody else. Your ultimate market, your ultimate vision is to build a market, to build a product which sells, right? So, and I've experienced that myself hands-on with World Sensing. We have been developing hands-on radios, multi-hub radios. I figured out it doesn't work. As CTO, I said, we need to dump this. This was 2 million euros, which essentially I said, we're going to bin it away overnight. We had a big fight. I had my way, and that's why the company is alive. So sometimes you have to do that, okay? Overall, companies suffer from cash flow problems, and maybe we're going to hear a little bit about this later on. B2B, business to business, it's because sales cycles are very long. So my company specializes in smart city sales. Between knocking on the door of the town hall and getting the first check, sometimes 6 years, right? So I have to pay 50 people salary for 6 years with not a single P coming in. Now that's a cash flow problem. And everybody who runs a B2B business here, they know. B2C is different. You need a lot of cash because you need to reach market, through marketing, you need to reach people, etc. So there are different challenges here, and raising cash is a totally different story in different countries. So World Sensing grew out of Barcelona, Southern Europe, and to raise capital there from the venture capitalists is an experience, right? So what they give you 100,000 euros for something which works and has clients, right? So I told them, guys, why do you give us the money? There's no venture in there. There's nothing. You're not risking anything. You're acting as a bank. So Southern Europe is really problematic for raising capital. London is different. The UK is very different. It's an order of magnitude, factor 1 to 10. So instead of 100,000, I get 1 million. And I can show a prototype, maybe with some customers interested, but not necessarily sales going. US is totally different yet, and not sure it's a better model, but they get maybe $10 million with a PowerPoint, right? So our competitors, essentially, in the markets, who, by the way, didn't make it in the end, got £10 million for showing a PowerPoint. So that's the United States VC scenario in Silicon Valley. It's not bad because in the end, it's not the first move advantage which gets you out in the market. That's a big misconception. So having the idea first means nothing, okay? It's the first to be able to scale advantage, which really makes a difference. And for that, you're either really lucky or you need a lot of capital to get it going. Okay? But overall, everybody is in the room, and some of you are entrepreneurs, I was told. Others maybe are inspiring entrepreneurs. You should try it. It's a fantastic experience. People talk about failure of starting companies. I don't agree. Anybody who starts a company, you learn. And you give people employment. I'm extraordinarily proud of having given people 8 years, 50 people 8 years money they can bring home and feed their families. There's a strong social component to this, which I think everybody should be proud of, whether the company lives on or doesn't live on. Okay? So let me move on now to universities, a world I understand pretty well because I'm, for the worst or the best, a university professor at the moment. And universities, at least in the United Kingdom, try to become entrepreneurial. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, ethically speaking, something we need to change the charter of universities, I'll leave that to you to discuss. What I do know is that there's a huge potential of making this work. Okay, universities have all the talent they need. Brilliant minds. We have people who are doing a Series A fundraising every year. Okay, that's what we do when we ask for grants, whether that's grants from the government or grants from somebody else, from the European Commission. We are filling in documentation. It's our business plan. We're submitting it year by year, okay? So we're really talented in that. And actually what I appreciated most from the people at university is that they understand the concept of deadline, okay? At least the word dead in deadline, meaning there's a line you can't actually overcome, right? So all our other people we hired, they really struggled with that. University people, we know how to handle it. So why isn't it happening? Well, universities do a lot of mistakes, and King's hired me partially to address precisely that problem. So the first problem universities do is they think the idea is everything. So they put everything on patenting. You know, they have an idea, take the academic, patent 1, 2, 3 patents, and then that patent is languishing around. Nobody's doing anything for that because there are no mechanisms streamlined to make anything out of this patent, right? So most of the patents just get lost. It happened in my case, so I had some pioneering patent for 4G. If you use 4G technology, some of this stuff was invented by me. King's College patented it, and 5 years before it really became important, they dropped it. How stupid is that, right? And that's what universities do because there's no mechanism in place. So there's too much emphasis on actually the very beginning. And those who are entrepreneurs, they know beginning is important, but that's just 0.01% of the journey. Then it's a long road, and you're going to pivot all the time because the market will want something else which you initially had in mind, okay? So therefore, that's mistake number one, and we're trying to change that. I tell people, you know, don't focus so much on patenting, focus more on the roadmap. Mistake number two is they think because they own the academic, they have to own any startup or any company which comes out of university. So you see silly configurations like 50% belongs to the entrepreneur, the academic, and 50% belongs to university. So what is that, okay? 50%, so if I'm an entrepreneur, there's somebody here beside me, 50%, I don't know even who that is. And imagine you're an investor, right? Some investors are in this room. Would you invest in something which belongs 50% to something you don't even have a face, you have no accountability, you don't really know how to call? It doesn't work. So we're pushing through this concept now of the golden share, where the university would take a share of that. They have a right of doing that. They should take that, right? They give all the ingredients to make that happen. But it's kind of 3%, 5%, non-dilutive until a certain nominal value, £100 million, £500 million, depends on the area, whether it's IT, whether it's health, etc., etc. And that is much more attractive because nobody feels threatened whilst the university makes its cash still on the long run. And so that's mistake number two. Mistake number three is they think just giving the academic the opportunity of doing this is all what matters. It's not really true. Academics, we know how to write papers, we know how to write books, we know how to do research. We have no clue how to build a company. We need a logbook, right? We need essentially instructions. They're just missing. There's nothing there. We need an incentive. So we are pushing for this now in King's to get this entrepreneur in residence status, which puts that at the same level as citations or number of journal papers. And I think that is really important to nurture this entrepreneurial culture in universities. And maybe the fourth mistake, and one of the biggest mistakes not only done by universities, is they think they can do it alone, so they wouldn't let anybody in. So King's College wouldn't let an Imperial College or UCL, etc., which is not true. Everybody who's done entrepreneurship knows no matter how broad your skill base, you will always need some foreign talent. So you need to open up. You need other university, other skill sets, other tech guys to come in and do you that company. It's really, really important, okay? What else is important? I think the innovation clusters are really important, and maybe I'm going to link this here to the cities, because I have a lot of experience working with cities through my company, also for King's College. But and maybe Riga is a good place for that. You need literally things closely together. Okay, that's really important. Driving distance is okay. Walking distance is better. Yeah, you need to have these people in one pot, have a coffee together, talk, etc. Build this up here in Riga, and you will succeed, because just having that dynamic, plus the capital, plus the intellectual capabilities of this city, will essentially leverage on that and make essentially the ecosystem grow. So that's very important. Bring together universities, bring together VCs, bring together research centers, accelerators, incubators, whatever it takes really to make this happen, just put them together. There is no first order business model for that. There is not. I cannot tell you if you put these 5 players together, in 10 years' time you will have 10 billion companies. We can't do that. But there's a second order gain here, okay? People are talking to each other. It's a social thing, network. It's a human interaction thing. And those who build companies know that's really important. So do that. That's why Silicon Valley works. That's why Tel Aviv works. That's why Berlin starts to work. That's why London works. Barcelona works. Because it's all together in a single ecosystem, right? And we have trialed this out with the smart city market. And smart cities, maybe you're going to be talking about this a little later on. I'll be unfortunately on the way back already to London. But smart cities is a term which has been kind of almost overused. I think there are more smart city experts or smart city PowerPoints on the planet than smart cities themselves, which is a rather sad state to be in. It's become an urban philosophy rather than something hands-on. And we see that cities where you have these clusters together really work, because all the other cities, they still have the separation between smart and cities. Okay, that's the biggest challenge, really, to bring this together. The smart guys are the IBMs, the Ciscos, the World Sensings, whatever you have. And then you have the city guys, companies like NSL, Swarco. You've never heard of them, right? But these are billion-dollar companies who own the city. What do? They draw lines. They put parking machines. They put pipes. They maintain things. You don't hear them because they're not sexy, but they own the city. They don't want the smart guys, the IBMs and the Ciscos, suddenly to come in and tell them how to run their business they have been running for the past 4,000 years, right? Doesn't make sense. That's why we have that friction. And World Sensing at the very beginning was talking a lot to the Ciscos and IBMs until we realized that's the wrong party to talk to. Remember my name and surname? They were not the one who were willing to pay the check. It was NSL and Swarco who were. So we went underground, right? Off the press, everything, there's nothing sexy about talking to these companies, but we get essentially our paycheck, and I can maintain my people and grow the company. That's really important. So to bring that together, the city side and the smart side, I think, is the biggest challenge of the 21st century. And only when that happens is when we will have smart cities emerge, essentially. Okay? So let me just finish off with one thing, just to remind you, really. And I'm saying this again and again. So mathematically speaking, there's very little you can do. If you want to start something, whether it's a smart city project, whether it's your company, etc., you want to own it 100%, most likely you will not succeed. 100% sounds very attractive, but will be 0. 100% of 0 is 0. Nothing we can do about it, okay? Share. 50% of something is more than that. 25% of even more than that is even more than that, right? So therefore, the mentality has to change. It has to be a sharing mentality. It has a work together mentality, a collaboration mentality, which is why the innovation hubs are important, whether you're tackling smart agriculture, whether you're tackling smart cities, or anything else you want to do, okay? And I urge you, if you haven't done it, even you, Mr. President, if you haven't done a company, do it. It's great, right? It's like jumping off the cliff, as they say, and assemble the airplane on the way down. And often, you don't even have instructions. I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mischa. We will have chances for questions and answers, but Mr. President is leaving to establish a company. He follows advice of Mr. Dohler. So, but before Mr. President is establishing a company, I have one question. Maybe before you, Mischa, maybe before you take mic off, I have one sporadic question. We can do it later, but I still have. You know, there is sensitive issue in the year. You were mentioning one which is be open to great minds and innovative people. Also, question of refugees in Latvia at the moment raised the question what kind of quality we need to immigrants, etc. Of course, this is not a question about immigration to specialists like you, but what would you say is the role of different nations or smart people from different nations in UK, and what is attitude of United Kingdom? Does UK support that as a system, or just simply because legislation allows, so great minds come to you? So.
Yeah, a very good question. So we have a bit of a political friction at the moment, because I'm sure you've heard of the party called UKIP in the UK, which is putting a lot of right pressure on the votership, which is rather unfortunate, because we had a very good visa system where people could just come after university, stay on automatically for 2 years, which is the time you need to settle, leverage on your contacts and grow essentially things you want to grow. That has been taken out. So now to get big talent into the UK is a headache. It's a real headache. Don't do that, okay? Just make it as easy as possible for people to come. I'm sure you will get some people you don't want.
People, or how do you measure that?
You want what you don't want to do is you don't want to take that decision, because there is no recipe for that, and people who have dealt with smart people know that. But what you want to do is you want to build an environment, a platform for innovation to act as a magnet. Even have your own people, right? So what I could imagine happens a lot is a lot of you good people go to Silicon Valley, go to the UK, but never come back. Okay, you don't want that. You want to make it as attractive as possible and have the ecosystem and the market filter out that talent.
Yeah, just a little bit to continue, and then I let you to think about what else we will say in the question and answer sessions. But actually, cities are competing, and as Barcelona was a city where people like to live, and great innovative minds or creative minds, they very often decide not where they want to work, but they decide where they want to live, and then work comes to them with a cluster of all the activities. Even scientists have tried to measure how to identify those creative cities, not necessarily smart in IT terms, but they are very smart. As Zevenberger said that Detroit used to be smart city, now they are green city. Detroit becoming from smart green, and I said, so what, not smart anymore? And Lei said they are even smarter nowadays. But trying artificially to identify and to pre-select, there have been very different indexes to identify, including gay index. They appear to be smarter or whatsoever, and how to identify, how to facilitate something in your city, and what is or in your country. And here are municipal leaders from different cities, and they might wonder what we are talking about, only about companies, and what is their role, role of municipality. Is it more attitude, infrastructure, money, financial support? So this was my last but rather comprehensive question to you.
It's a good one, actually, and we dealt quite a lot from, and the gentleman from IBM probably will have some better answers there from an analytical point of view. But having worked with Barcelona and London quite a bit, it seems to boil down a lot about brand building. right? You want to build a very strong brand of the city to make it very attractive. Part of the brand is that you have a job security, you have a lot of theaters you can go out to, bars, etc., good living conditions. So the brand building is very important. It's very different to marketing, right? So marketing is what you tell about Riga. Branding is what other people say about Riga. So if you build up a really good brand, people will automatically come here, and that is really what's happening in these clusters like Barcelona and London. It is me saying to
Berlin nowadays.
on Berlin, etc., right? So, and the planet is very big. We have so many people, and I'm sure if you play that right, there will be very attractive components of this city here around which you can build a very strong brand. And I wish you good luck with that.